everyone. Welcome. Hey, everyone. Welcome. Thanks for joining us today. We are going to get started here in just a second. Before we do you want to just share where you're joining from? Give us a thumbs up or a smile if you can hear us and see our little slideshow. And yeah, we'll get going. In the meantime, we're going to let a couple other people join, but feel free to drop any questions that you want to get started with in the chat, and we'll kick it off in just a minute. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome again to Office Hours. We do this the first Wednesday of every month. We're a little off track this month just for spring break. Hopefully some of you maybe had spring break. Matt and Mike are joining us today. Mike got to spend some time down in Florida. It looks like we have people from Florida here. And then Matt, I know he wouldn't want me to share this, but he got fourth place in a FIRST robotics competition last week. His team that he mentors. And so he's officially going to Worlds next week. So if anyone wants to give him a thumbs up, I'm sure he would hate it. So anyway, housekeeping things before we start. We're streaming to both YouTube and Teams. So for those of you on the Teams meeting, if you have questions, you're welcome to drop them in chat. If you'd prefer to actually come on and unmute, you're welcome to raise your hand, and we can allow you to unmute and chat back and forth. We have a few questions that we're going to get started with that were sent ahead of time, but otherwise, like I said, you're welcome to drop them in chat. And then, let's see, anything else? I can't think of anything else. So I'm going to turn it over to Matt and Mike now.
Mitch, I would imagine that you're assuming that one of us has the list that we're supposed to be looking at.
Completely unprepared for these questions, too, so this ought to be fun.
Come on. Tanya was a good...
Yeah, she sent it ahead of time. I know. Yeah. I just have to look.
It was great, but I was in Florida, so...
Yeah.
I wasn't paying attention. Okay. I remember it. I just didn't look at it before the meeting or before we started. So we got this question from Tanya. When should a low-code citizen dev solution become an IT managed solution? Is it about complexity, number of users, business value, future-proofing, and or question? Which is a great question. And Michaela, one of the other people, she saw the question and her response was, it's so nuanced, which is effectively what my answer is going to be. There's not a good answer for when it should or shouldn't be. A lot of it has to do with a lot of different things. So if you are, I know, Tanya, we've talked to you quite a bit. You're part of a very large organization that has a large IT infrastructure. For them, they're probably going to say things like, when it's business critical, when they're going to get a phone call that it's down and they need to fix it at 11 o'clock at night and they need somebody to do it.
How many users does it impact?
Well, one of their ways to do that will be how many users does it impact? Does it impact external users? There's another model which is like if you're doing anything that's more pro developer level, right? So if you're doing custom components or you're doing, Dataverse, so you're doing actual quote unquote database development, right? So some of it is technology based, some of it's user based, some of it's business criticality based. It really depends. I would tell you that these things a lot of times end up in a spectrum or a journey of things where you start out doing something maybe as a citizen dev, and then it slowly builds and builds and builds, and eventually it becomes something more formal and built into formal IT. But I don't think there's a really hard and fast rule or a good metric to say when it should become an IT solution or IT managed solution. I would tell you that 100%, the more business critical, the more it has an impact on your organization from a revenue, from a customer facing, from a choose your perspective to look at it, the more I would encourage to have IT involved. Yeah. Whether or not that's IT managed, it's also unclear exactly what you mean by that. If you mean they're doing all the development, they're the ones that are only touching it, etc., I think that's questionable. I think if you mean, hey, we have managed, environments that are managed or owned or maintained or supported or, monitored by IT, I think there's also another answer there.
Yeah, so she had a follow-up question in the chat that said, how do you combat being, the accusations of being shadow IT, which I think is really interesting. Because in a lot of ways, if you think about shadow IT and what it is or can be, it's often the space where innovation is happening, right? Yeah. So it's not necessarily a bad thing. However, if you're, running into that conflict of being accused of being shadow IT, right, and you're adding risk to the business or whatever those problems might be, I think the answer is ask to be part of the governance process. Be a champion for defining what that should be for your organization and get involved and help to identify where those risks might be, and then
so the whole concept of shadow IT is part of the challenge. Like, what do people mean when they say shadow IT? If they mean anyone who's not in IT that's doing technical work, yeah, you're shadow IT. Like, you are. Like, that's just the way it is. If that's their definition, by definition, that's what you are. But that doesn't mean that it's bad. Like, I would say their definition is bad, right? If you're taking that as being a derogatory or a bad term, a term that means you're doing something wrong, just because you're doing work that's not and you're not part of IT does not make it wrong. For me, what it means is you're actively doing things to circumvent IT policies, practices, procedures, governance, whatever, right? For whatever reason. If that is what you're engaging in, then you're I don't mean you personally because I don't know what you're doing, but you're like, that person would be shadow IT, right? To me, that is what shadow IT is. Now, if you're at the same time engaged, or if you're engaged with IT trying to shape governance and give feedback, and IT is partnering with you to create these solutions and understand what you're doing and support you and like all of these, and you're like in a partner, like not you personally, but both end users and IT are in a partnership, that is not shadow IT, right? For me, the line is crossed when you are actively doing stuff that you're not supposed to be doing, and you're doing it for the sole purpose of either A, IT's super difficult to talk to, so I'm not going to talk to them about it. B, I talked to them about it, they told me no, but I don't really care. I'm still going to use my USB drive that's got viruses on it. I don't really care, right? Like, or I'm going to still have my little laptop server thing under my desk. Like, that's the classic shadow IT thing, right? Like, it's so much different than what people just blanketly say, you're shadow IT. It's all about that engagement. And the reason that you could be still now, like you could really be shadow IT is not because you are actively trying to avoid it, but because IT is not grown up enough to actually provide a facility, a way for you to do it in the light. And so you're doing it in the dark, in the shadows, because they don't have another way. Like, the only other option is, we've worked for organizations where, the only other option is to sit in a line of 7-year wait to get IT time to actually develop a simple form that you could do in MS Forms with Power Automate, right? Like that's not an option either. Like that's ridiculous, right? So in those worlds, I would say the problem lies with IT, right? Like someone's being forced into that situation because they don't have another option, right? Yep. So I don't know, that was long-winded, but like for me, it all comes down to what they mean and why they're saying what they're saying and like the nuance behind it. Yeah. So
I think usually it's the bad connotation of that phrase.
It's always bad connotation, but the question is, have they self-reflected if it's coming from IT? If IT is the one saying it, are they self-reflecting on how they could be causing that problem?
Yeah, absolutely. So
we had another one before, Tanya, that we kind of glossed over a little bit from James. I saw your video on Asset Management Power App. I want to know if that can be updated to have a checkout check-in feature. I'm not sure who did that.
It
was Matt Kahn.
Yeah.
I don't know enough about it, but I'm sure you can.
So the way that app works, the template itself out of the box just uses a Excel file, I think, for its data, which is a bit problematic. So in its pure form, as it's delivered, you wouldn't be able to do check-in, check-out. If I'm not mistaken, I think Matt Kahn walked through ways that you can connect that instead of to Excel to a SharePoint list.
He gave a recommendation that would be the better way.
Yeah, so if you were to connect it to a SharePoint list, you could potentially use a check-in and check-out. However, I don't know off the top of my head if check-in, check-out is something that is easily supported by the out-of-the-box controls that you get with a Canvas app, which is what that template is delivered as. So I think there's some open questions there, but like conceptually you could do it such that, connected to a SharePoint list and you enable publishing on that SharePoint list and check in, check out on that list, and then you could potentially use those features. Alternatively, you could implement check-in, check-out with another column on the same list, and so not actually use the check-in, check-out from SharePoint, and instead use a separate metadata column and manage that yourself with a check-in, check-out button in your Canvas app. So there's probably a couple different ways that you could do that.
He had a follow-up question. Can Bulb Digital make an app for me?
The answer is yes. We do that all the time. Obviously, if you're interested in that, reach out. We have a bunch of different ways to get a hold of us.
Let's go to our contact page on the website.
Go to our contact page.
We'll chat.
We watch it all the time. Set up a meeting or a discussion about whatever you would like.
Yep, we'll be happy to have that discussion.
So the next one was from Nicole. Associate an MS project with another different group. I ultimately want to add it to the tab in Teams channel. So it's not clear whether or not you mean an MS project like...
Project Online?
Project Online or Project for the Web or like an actual project file, like a desktop MS project. The second part of the question is also... Oh, Project for the Web. Okay. So associate an MS project with another different group. Tab to Teams channel. Yep. How do I view my MS project in all the different versions of project? Right now, I'm just using Project for the Web, but I have a license for the others. And when I open them up, my projects aren't there. Okay. So the first question about the different groups, if you're just trying to view it in a different group, I guess that's one question. If you're trying to have multiple groups, MS Project Online or MS Project for the Web is built around the concept of associating the project to a group or a team. And when you do that, there's one link. You can only have it associated with one group that's it. It can be associated with a group for access control and assignments and all of that good stuff. So are you trying to add it to two different groups, or are you just trying to provide a visibility into that project from a different group or team?
Or just trying to add a tab.
Yeah,
right. That
just adding a tab to another channel. And then
she says, so how do I switch the group?
So
Nicole,
you want to change...
if you prefer,
come off,
we can allow you to unmute if that's something you'd like to do. So.
Yeah, thanks. Hi, guys.
Hi.
Yeah, I have the project in Project for the Web. It's associated with a group. It was actually built by a user. I didn't realize it whenever she started it. And just started it with a very limited group. And I need to make it accessible to a larger group so that I can, I want to associate it to a team essentially.
Okay. If they created it, it should be associated with a team or a group right now. Do you just need to add people to that group, or do you have a different group or team that you want it to? Okay, so you want to change it from what it is now to something different.
Correct.
Okay, give me just a second here. I don't know that you can easily do that.
Does Project for the Web have an admin?
Not really. This is the admin
Okay.
of what I'm looking at right now. But give me just a second. I'm looking quick. Delete it. Yeah. So I don't know that you can see. This is just managing it. You can't actually change it.
PowerShell.
I think your best option would be. I believe there's a copy function. My only question there is I don't know whether or not that. Let me see. I bet it keeps the same. No, it doesn't. So that might be your best bet, would be to copy it. Because I think if I click on this, yeah, then you can move it. You can create a group or add it to an existing group. Are you sharing my screen right now? Yeah. Okay. So, Nicole, can you see my screen?
Yeah. Okay, so I would just do the copy, and then do you think that that's going to bring all of the details of the project with it, or do you think I'm going to have to recreate
it won't
some of the details?
It won't keep the assignments, but most of the rest of the things should be created. Like, I'm not sure that it'll keep some of the history. So if you go into a task and you go into the details, if there's heavily using comments or conversations or attachments, I'm not sure that will come over. But definitely the general details of the tasks will be there.
Awesome,
I'll see if when I get off here, I'll see there might be a PowerShell or something else. You may not know this, but this is all just in Dataverse. So it's possible also that you could do something in Dataverse to switch it as well. So all of these things, this is basically just a fancy app built on Dataverse is what it is. The default place that it's stored is all in the default environment. So if you go to your default environment, so if I go into here, and this is our default environment, and I go to tables, I'm going to struggle probably to remember which one it is, but it should be something like, there's bookings, forget what it's called. Let me see, project. Yeah, so here's project task, project team members. So these are all just tables that I'm a sysadmin, so I can click on project team members. I don't know, it may, let's see what it does. So right here, you can see the different team members in the projects and the different projects, etc., that I can just view. I would imagine that one of these is the group that it's associated to. I'm sure it's more complicated than this, and you so I don't know that I would mess with it manually.
That's one of those void your warranty things, right?
Yeah, correct. Well, there might also be some documentation out there. I just don't know where it is.
So the quick little search that I did basically showed me that the copy is the recommended option, and there's no other recommended way to do it.
There isn't. Okay. Yeah. Yep. Okay. So that's what I would recommend is do that copy.
Yeah, cool. And then the second part of the question is just about the different versions. I'm, kind of new to this, so I'm just using Project for the Web, but my organization bought a license that includes, the desktop version and also, I guess, the online version.
Project
I get
Online.
Confused with all the different, versions of Project, but when I go into the desktop version, I can't see any of the projects that are created.
Yeah, so the integration with Project Desktop isn't super great. You can open one of these within Project Desktop. I can send you, or maybe I'll post it in chat. There's a link to the integration between the two, but it really is just going to allow you to view and do a little bit within the desktop app. But it's not seamless. they're all separate things for the most part. You've got Project
Gotcha.
Online, Project for the web, and then Project Desktop, and they're kind of all have different purposes, different niches for what you're trying to do, and it's not like one project across all of them.
Does that mean from an enterprise standpoint, it's difficult to do enterprise-wide project reporting?
No, if you're looking for enterprise project reporting, you would want to use Project Online.
Period.
Like that's the difference. Project Online, that is meant for portfolio management. It's meant for like that enterprise-wide.
So from an organizational strategy standpoint, you want to establish what your goals are with project management, and then choose a horse.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good to see you, Nicole. Thanks for joining.
All right, next question from Darren. He's struggling with user adoption of Microsoft Teams at a large company. How would we recommend going about identifying an executive sponsor? That's the first part of the question. And then the second part of the question is, do you recommend a governance group for Teams or SharePoint? Good question. How would you recommend going about identifying an executive sponsor? So this is one of those things where we like to use, and we've talked about this in some previous podcasts and maybe in some other blog posts, we talk about the champions model. And so it's all about identifying people who are going to kind of evangelize a little bit and be the leaders in using the new technology. So they're going to kind of be pioneering in a frontier, so to speak. And I don't know, one of the things that I always thought was interesting about that model was to look for people who are interested in innovating and moving things forward, but also people who are popular, right, would be one way to say it. And so it's kind of like you're finding the people that the other folks in the organization are looking up to, the people that you might say, oh, I want to be like the cool kids, right? And you try to find those people that kind of have that combination of both of those things, of being popular and good communicators, but also innovators who care about, kind of moving things forward and pushing the envelope a little bit. So that was one method I always thought that was interesting. I don't know, Matt, do you have other?
Yeah, so I have a lot of thoughts on this. An executive sponsor is probably not your biggest problem. What your biggest problem is having a team or a methodology for a change adoption within the organization. It's not clear how big of an organization you're working for. Depending on the size.
He says large, so.
Yeah. The question is if it's like 100, 200, 300 users. A lot of times people think that comes from like IT or comes from like, there's a lot of different ways that it could be implemented. Change could be implemented in your organization.
30,000. And Darren, I did allow you to unmute. If you'd prefer to unmute, you're welcome to.
Okay, 30,000. So you're a very, very large, very large organization.
Hey, first off, I've just come across here also YouTube decided, so thanks for putting that out there. I know it takes a lot of effort to do that, but it's really interesting here. Some of the challenges. So I'm one of the champions, and in my mind, when I look at Microsoft Teams, use case is so clear. I'm having a hard time explaining to people who don't get it why for a we're organized around teams, and we're all around the world. So it's just I have individual pockets of people who use Microsoft Teams very well, and then I have other people who are only using SharePoint sites, and so they're not understanding the concept of the team. And I try to get material from Microsoft to tell me how do I go about formalizing this a little bit, but it's a real struggle regardless of the company.
Do you guys have so you said you're a champion, so then you guys have a champion program of some sort?
Well, I created it myself, if you can believe it, here, just because there's a few of us cool kids / nerd, that who enjoy this kind of stuff, geeking out on it. Which I'm pretty proud of myself. I've got like 1,500 people in it, but trying to get the traction at a higher level, I hate to say enforce, but to enforce everybody to use Teams in a uniform way.
How did you get the ability, authorization, whatever, to create that 1,500 user champions team?
Yeah, so it's a private group that I created, and just through word of mouth, it got out, and people
wanted to be part of it,
join in, and once a month we do a basically a webinar where we go through Power BI, Power Automate, and just Excel XLOOKUP, that kind of stuff. So we're doing the whole gamut.
How does your IT structure work? Like, do you guys have a central IT that is all encompassing? Is that where like the rollout of Teams came from, or like how did that work within your organization?
Yeah, so the way it works is IT provides, the E5, it's either E5 or E3 license. I always get the two confused, but they're about the same.
Yep.
They provide the license, and the expectation is the business lifts it and runs with it.
Got it.
There. So it's getting the business to understand that we've been given the golden ticket with the E5 license to do all kinds of wonderful things.
Tanya pointed something out in the chat that I think is interesting and maybe key, and she said that a organizational communication charter might be a good place to start. And so I was going to ask the question about, like, what is the communication strategy at an organizational level? Like,
do you guys have a strong core communications team? Do you have an intranet where corporate communications are being posted or anything like that?
Yeah, we do. I think we have. I think I'm trying to be. We still leave it a lot to the discretion of the end team to use Teams or not to use Teams. And again, I need Microsoft to come up with another name for Microsoft Teams, because I keep saying team all the time. So I think there's still a little too much discretion in my mind for how the end user, they can use it or they don't have to use it. Because again, it's a tough job market out there, and people.
Do you think that you have an established communication policy or strategy for something like chat, organization-wide? Just as a small example.
I'm sure we do. I'm absolutely, for a company this size, I'm sure we do. It's kind of one of those things that I just assume people aren't going to be stupid in chat. But
are people? So let me ask another way: are people using Slack?
No, we don't use Slack.
Okay, so are people generally using Teams to chat? Like when you say would they have a choice to use
so
Teams
right now,
or not, it sounds like you're saying they either create a team and there's SharePoint behind it, or they just create a SharePoint site.
Yeah, exactly. So we came from I'm blanking on the before Teams.
Skype for Business.
Skype, thank you. Yeah, Skype for Business. So people are still using it for phone calls and for IMing. That's the majority of what people use Teams for. And to explain to end users that it's a lot more than that.
So this is really a question about onboarding people to the collaboration capabilities.
Yeah, but doing it in a way that works for your organization. So the two things that I would say is that I think there's a couple different strategies you could take. One is I would potentially, someone authorized you to spend time to get these 1,500 people, whether or not it was your boss or somebody else. Like somehow you got some time to do that. I don't think it would probably be incredibly longer to start to work with the communications team to once a month have an article that goes out to corporate communication that says, hey, this is a real world example of how we're doing this, right? And look at what this does, right? If you need help, these are some people, here's a list of champions in your areas, right? Contact somebody, right? Reach out. Grassroots, very we're going to give this information out and provide examples. There was somebody else in chat that talked about providing real-world examples, not Microsoft examples, there's a lot of truth to that as well. When it's contextualized for an individual and they go, oh, I can stop doing this way and I can start doing that way. Wow, okay, let me try that, right? So I think that's one piece of it. The other piece of it that I would say is that maybe you have a conversation with that, you have a pretty large group, honestly, 1,500 employees that hey, give me some areas that you think we could work on and let me go, I'll partner with you and talk to your management and let's talk about working in your area, right? Like eat the elephant one bite at a time, right? Identify an area where you can get local sponsorship. And when you get local sponsorship and buy-in, and they get really good, then you get an EVP or somebody higher up that goes, this was transformative in my area. I think you guys should all do the same thing, right? Like this also a very common thing in business where everybody wants to be the cool kids, and when somebody sees somebody successful, they go, oh, I want to replicate that, right? Those would be the things I would say, because I think getting high-level executive sponsorship, especially in a world where IT is largely, we provide these things, you guys figure out how to use it, and they don't try to get in the weeds with the business, if you will. I think you'll struggle finding, the challenge is finding an executive sponsor that is the right fit, because likely most of your executive sponsors would be either way too high level and divorced from the reality of what's going on, or way too focused on a particular business unit or a particular area, and if they were the one owning it, everybody else would be like, why are you getting in my business, kind of thing, right?
Tanya pointed out another thing in chat. She said, basically asked the question, are we using emails for corporate communication or something
correct.
else?
That's why I asked about an intranet.
So in terms of finding that executive sponsor that might be a good person for it, find the executive sponsor who would be interested in turning off email.
Yeah.
Right, in favor of Teams.
Something else, yeah.
Okay.
So those would be the things I would say. It sounds like you've actually got a pretty good start. I mean, 1,500 people, is a really good, for your size, that's a really good size. I don't know who's sponsoring the work that you're putting into, because that's no small effort, but start from there, grow from there. Start, getting more content that you're generating that can be used outside of that people there can take other places, and it'll start to spread.
Okay. Thank you.
Cool.
So the second part of his question, I don't know if we touched on it a whole lot, but he asked, do you recommend a governance group for Teams or SharePoint? So if we want to get into kind of some specifics about that.
Governance.
That can be important. So when everybody starts with Teams, even at large organizations, oftentimes, it's not so much now, but when it was first a thing, IT wasn't aware of it, and people were just it was the Wild West creating Teams, and everybody's like, oh, this is great. And then some people figured out, oh, we should probably have some governance wrapped around that. And so then you got to start thinking about data classification and retention policy and all of that kind of stuff. Because the reality is you're going to have some sensitive data there maybe, or you don't want to keep everything forever, right? Maybe you want your chats to disappear after 180 days or something, right? So establishing those policies can be important, especially for large organizations.
I think the other question is, again, it goes again to how the organization is set up and how it works. Usually that would be IT that would take the lead in a lot of those things, which is both a blessing and a curse. They have the technical knowledge. They understand a lot of the details of it, but they oftentimes create rules that the business doesn't like. In my opinion, it does belong in the IT space, being the team that would manage the governance with heavy influence from the business in relation to feedback and input into how these things should be used or need to be used within the organization. So for me, when you talk about how to set it up, it would be getting that, hey, we want IT to own this, but we want to have input into it, and we want to create, and another point about your champions thing, I would imagine the champions thing today probably doesn't have a whole heck of a lot of involvement with IT. I would get IT involved in it, right? I would be, because they're going to be your partners in this thing. They should be, the whole point of the champions model, a true champions model, is bridging that gap between executives, IT, and end users, and creating that space that it's okay for users to say, this sucks and I need this fixed, and IT to go, this is a cool new feature, what do you guys think about it? And executives to say, hey, we just got sued and we need to do this because this is what it's required. What's that going to do to y'all, right? So it's for me, that's what it's all about, is that group. Then there would be other areas for governance that would kind of feed into that, for Power Platform, for SharePoint, for OneDrive, all these different areas, depending, again, on the size of your organization.
Mm-hmm. Good deal. Looks like we got a new question from Nicole.
Before we jump into that, I just want to reset the room real quick for anyone that's new joining. This is Office Hours. You're welcome to ask any Office 365-esque or like workplace question that you need help with, we're here to get you unstuck. We have Matt Dressel and Mike Bodell with us today. And so you're welcome to drop any questions that you have in chat. We've got about 20 some minutes left, so we do have some time to take some more. So yeah, thanks for joining, and I'll hand it back over to Mike.
Nice. Thanks, Mitch. So the question from Nicole is having to do with MS Power Virtual Agents. Looks like a three-part question. Is there a way to get the bot to initiate the interaction, like with a "Hi, can I help you?" question? Second part, can I have a bot prompt the user to fill out a form and then email that form data to an email address? And the third part, how do I get the bot to be smarter other than adding more trigger words? Example, pick up the word test and synonym to the word exam. So that's a good question. That's an area that we have a little bit of experience with.
I think generally speaking, the answer is to all of your questions is yes. You can do all of those things. You can make it smarter. You can have it prompt the user and fill out a form and then do something else. Yes, you can have it initiate an interaction. The challenge is how much work you want to put in and what tools you use. Power Virtual Agent in particular, like as its own thing, I don't believe you can initiate an interaction. However, you could use a Power Automate based on some trigger somewhere to say, hey, do you need something, right? Like what's going on?
In terms of the filling out a form, like this could, like I think you can display an adaptive card.
Correct.
Right.
Yep.
Can be a really good way to give the user, like prompt them for input and click a button and do various things. I would look at that as opposed to routing them to a Microsoft form, for example. So adaptive cards could be a good place to fill in that gap.
Yep, and an adaptive card can then trigger and you can do something with the things that are pulled in to go do something. Making it smarter. This one I know you can. I'm less clear on what the solution would be. I believe the best way would be don't use Power Virtual Agents and do I forget what they call it, but there's the Power Virtual Agents is kind of. It's simplified. It's meant for keywords and like somebody to easily create, these triggers that would make things happen. But you can also do natural language, AI stuff with chatbots within Azure. But you're talking about a completely different thing, completely different development process. It's not. It is no longer a low code, no code. It's pretty pro code level. But with that, you have complete control over everything.
Yeah, and once you move into the AI realm, it becomes all about the quality of the data that you're collecting and the actions that get taken on it, right? It's constantly learning the model, and so the more data that you have, the better it gets. Is kind of the idea there. All right, Tanya has an interesting comment. Would love to see a model SharePoint site or team that builds on Employee Ideas app, but is for Power Platform sharing. So peer-to-peer support, inspiring innovation, et cetera, sort of a GitHub plus adoption model dream team.
Yeah, Microsoft has it's not Employee Ideas, but they have like a Champions template that's something similar.
I don't know, like SharePoint has like the lookbook. I don't know if there's a lookbook for...
I mean, there's not a lookbook, but there's a ton of templates, a ton of templates for teams. I agree with you, Tanya. I think, as with most things, Microsoft creates little templates and little components that you can bring in and try to use, but they're often only 80% there. The conversation we had earlier with the earlier question about the
asset
management app is a perfect example, right? Like it works as long as you don't really want to use it all the way, right? Yeah. And it's the same kind of thing. I think you mentioned it, the Employee Ideas. I think they've got a couple other templates that you could use that would be useful, but they're not quite all the way there. You have to be ready to customize them and update them and make them your own. And it would be really nice if there was just hey, this is the industry standard. This is what works for everyone.
I guess, Tanya, a question I have kind of to follow up on that. expressing a desire for something that would be created at the organizational level, or something that would be much broader than that, like available to all Microsoft users?
We did allow the mic if she wants to come chat.
Tanya's a good old friend
love Tanya.
at this point.
Sorry. Yeah, I feel like I should be quiet.
No, you're good.
So we have official IT Power Platform team.
Yep.
But they and we can all, chime in there, and we are helping each other there and whatnot. But we do not have the permission to turn that into anything more than what they're offering. So a bunch of us are kind of like the other gentleman was talking about earlier, thinking about creating our own place thing, whatever, where we can share across the entire tenant, regardless of agency, whatever. I got this to work. It's really cool.
Yeah.
Don't reinvent the wheel. I could do that. I could, the same kind of, it's an adoption thing in some ways, but it's also a efficiency and those kind of things. And just trying to figure out what the best widgets and the best ways and, find those best practices. So yes, something that Microsoft puts out that says, hey, this is a great way to set up. Like what I did on a previous, before I got into Power Platform on the SharePoint side, was using SharePoint Maven's knowledge base wiki article and metadata columns and surfacing IT tips to a specific agency based on category, program, or even software application. If I'm having trouble with Chrome, I can pull up all the stuff that we have for Chrome.
Yep. Yep.
If I'm having problem with a particular business area, I can search by that business area or whatnot, but I think there's a better way to do that than what I did. And I would, just looking for that, somebody say, show me some best practices. Cause I can't really find a lot of good examples. GitHub is great, but it doesn't have that social component.
Yeah. Okay.
Necessarily.
You need a community. Yeah. Would this be something
adoption community? Yeah.
that Yammer would fill like?
Well, so I can tell you,
that.
I can also tell you some things that we've done or been a part of at some organizations. So one organization that we work with, they've got a SharePoint communication site that is, the main source for modern technology information. So they've got pages and articles about SharePoint and OneNote and Word and Power Automate and Power Apps and Power BI and all of these things. It's managed more in IT level. It's meant for, hey, we have a new, policy going in place that's going to affect your chats, right? Like here's all the supporting documentation and help materials and everything else. That's the primary focus for it. But it might surprise you how much that is useful. The other thing is that it also, from end users, articles would come in that are relevant to end users. So it's not just like corporate IT is saying this. It's like, hey, somebody built this thing and they want to release it as a template. Here it is, and this is how it works, right? But it's very much communication. So it's not the social end of it. For the social end of it, they have two areas. They have one which is Yammer. So they have dedicated Yammer groups for a lot of the different technologies. And some, people from IT are monitoring it to try to help as an alternative to creating a support ticket. But it's also, quite frankly, there's a number of people like I think you would be, Tanya, who are helping other users as they go along, right? Answering questions, whatever it might be. Yammer's not super, compared to a chat within Teams, it's not exactly the same. It's not, there is some differences there, but honestly, it's pretty effective, especially when you want to have a scenario where very loosely related people, people who, maybe only never work together and just want to have this little chat. It works pretty well in that case. The notifications are a little bit better because you're not getting pinged every time about an update all the time. And Microsoft is making some updates to Yammer. It's no longer Yammer. It's Viva Engage, I think is what the new name is eventually going to be. And then the third thing they have is they have two separate teams there was another question from, I'm not sure, remember who exactly, but they were the Teams conversation. The way we differentiate the two, Teams, the application, and then team shared workspaces is the other term that we use. So a team shared workspaces is the team within Teams. But that's just what we do to try to keep it straight, because it is really difficult to have that conversation. But anyways, so they have two separate team shared workspaces, one for the champions team, which is where anyone who's a champion would be involved, and then they also have another one for the champions core team. And the champions core team are like the people running the champions team, so they're generating content for the next meeting, champions meeting, or having a conversation with Microsoft about a particular topic, or discussing something that's going on. So that's kind of what they do, and I think it's not ideal. It's not, you asked for best practice. I don't know that it's best practice. I don't know that it's nice as you would want or as I would want, but it's what they do, and I think for a very large organization, I think it is a good option. Different size organizations, I might try to recommend, you could probably just do a team and just have one team. But for them, for the size they are, that kind of approach really makes it work, I think.
Is there anything to the concept of being able to add, for example, flows or Canvas apps that you build to a list of like the available templates, so that other people in your organization could like pull those off of the shelf and use them for themselves?
Say that one more time, I'm sorry.
So let's say you build a flow that does some sort of specific personal automation task for you.
Yeah.
Right? Is there a way that I can just distribute that and make it available to the rest of my team?
There's Power Automate has some functionality to do that. It just gets messy because most people aren't going to build it in such a way that is really reusable.
I guess what I'm asking is, there's no way to add it as a template.
No, there is. Yeah. I don't use it very much because honestly, I think it's a holdover from when they first created it, and it doesn't have the power or the first person in product experience that you want from a template.
Gotcha.
But you can 100% do something like that.
Yeah. So just a way to create a library of.
Yeah, the problem is it doesn't create a library. It just says, "Oh, I shared this with some people," and I.
Yeah, it's not. It's not exactly what you would.
It's
want.
not like it's not like I am going to create. It's not like Microsoft's templates that they have. You can just add your own to it.
Yeah, and we've played with the idea. We've done it in a couple organizations where we've created like a SharePoint site where we've uploaded some solution packages where we said, here's the instructions on how to use it, and you can download it and go do it yourself. Now, one of the challenges that we've had with that is if you do that, if you're the one that creates that library of templates or solution packages that other people can use and you give them instructions, usually you're going to be the one that's on the hook for helping them when they run into a problem or get stuck. So you have to bear that in mind. So either your things need to be so simple that it's unlikely that they're going to call on you, or you need to be prepared to support them as if they're kind of a mini product.
Yeah. So the Tanya mentioned about wanting to have collapsible threads, and I do think that is something that Yammer provides and is really quite nice. So. Yeah, OData filters, expressions, pain point resolutions, So these would be the last things that Tanya's talking about these would be things that are like, hey, this is how you do OData filters. And the way that I would handle that is that would all be content that I would put on that communication portal. So the communication SharePoint site. So I would create a new article that says, hey, this is a quick start for OData filters. And I would try to not create a ton of content myself. If you find a content out there that you think is good and good content, create your page, have a link and say, hey, we found this article, it's really useful, and just
link
tag it internally.
Articles.
Yes, Mitch, link to our articles.
Microsoft has tons of good documentation for all of those things now. It's way better than it used to be.
I forgot. There is also another, I forget what the thing is called, Microsoft's product, or not product, but like a tooling that you can add into a SharePoint site that basically turns it into a personalized version of the Microsoft Help documentation. I'm struggling with the term right now. I'll see if I can look it up and get it. But you basically configure it and point it at the Microsoft docs, and then instead of having to go to a Microsoft doc and search around, it's like, oh, here's the documentation that you care about. Yeah. I want to see if I can find that quick.
I don't know.
I know we're down to like 9 minutes, I think, right? So if there's any other questions, I'm going to look for that thing. I can't remember the name of it at the moment, but
do we have any interesting questions we want to prompt people with before we're out?
YouTube's been quiet today.
very.
Someone on YouTube give us a smile or a thumbs up.
Let us know that we're still streaming.
Well, Michaela Brown says, just waiting for a southern accent from Mike.
I've been using one all along. What you see is what you get.
Thank you, Darren. Yeah, it was nice to meet you, and join us next time.
The next episode.
For the next regularly scheduled one, right?
Yeah.
Back to our first week.
Wednesday.
Yep.
We'll drop the link to office hours in chat, and it's out there. You can register now if you'd like.
Should take a shot for every heart emoji we get.
Sounds like a bad idea. Here we go. So I'm gonna get this so that we have it. What is this thing again? M365 Learning Pathways. That's what it's called.
Tanya's anchoring us with the final question of the hour.
Tips on how to get the training listed in your job postings. Tips on how to get. Tanya, do you want to expand on that a little bit?
I'm just wondering how to fill in some of those gaps with things that you can't, teach yourself because you don't have access to building those where, like Azure or Dynamics or some of those things that aren't.
So stuff you haven't
some
been
of those
given any access to, and how do you go learn it?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Dataverse, as we've discussed, Dataverse is a dream.
Yeah, so that's a really, really, really good question.
Because I've heard that the Microsoft certifications aren't very well received in some circles, and some circles say, yeah, you should do that anyway.
I mean,
I don't.
Yeah, so
I just don't know.
The certifications are really the quote unquote the premium thing in regards to proving that you know what it is, but they're very hard to get. They're very expensive, and at the end of the day, knowing the technology isn't as important as being able to understand business needs and being able to develop a solution that meets the needs and is successful. So that's some of the challenge that you have with different people's opinions about it. The thing that I would say is related to your other problem. I have people that I have helped give access because they don't have another way to try these things out and mess with them.
Yeah, so I was going to point at well, what is the governance? Is there something that's blocking you from doing it?
I mean,
does your organization have developer environments? That might be
Most of them probably wouldn't let you have it.
Yeah.
Like
Well,
that.
I don't have a business case either. So, I mean, when
Yeah,
you're
yeah.
not an IT staff,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
spending that time on when their budgets are tight. So,
yeah. I think the only real option is to take some sort of course or training, official training. With most things from Microsoft, especially, they will provide a tenant that you can mess with for 60 days or something like that, that you have access to. The problem is getting that training, right?
What about if you could get your manager to approve a monthly dev license for you?
I mean, the developer licenses are free. The question is whether or not your IT department will let you do it. So, Tanya, in your particular case, for you individually,
like Visual Studio, like
yes, but again, that's very expensive.
yeah.
So, for you in particular, the two things I would tell you is, commercial tenants have developer licenses. They're assigned to a person, and they allow you to get an environment, and in that environment, you can kind of do whatever you want. And then there's no cost. There's no cost to you, to the organization. If they will allow those, you can say, hey, this is where I want to, I don't want to be messing around in the default environment. I just want a place where I can do some development. They shouldn't have a problem with it. It's from a compliance perspective, it's your environment. You can't be adding other people. It's not like you're getting a personal place that you can go deploy production solutions in. That would be, but you can do Dataverse. You can do a lot of different things there without any concern regarding a lot of the other issues. Licensing still is a little bit of an issue because you still, even in a developer environment, there are some things that you wouldn't have access to unless you had a license. What Mike was just talking about, which we're actually going to be doing a little bit more research into, and if I find out, I'm happy to share it. We currently have MSDN subscriptions, which MSDN subscriptions come with a developer tenant, so that whenever I show my screen and show what I'm doing here, it comes from a developer tenant. I believe there's other ways to get a developer tenant, but I'm not sure exactly how yet. That's one thing that we're going to be looking into because we'd like to stop paying for the full MSDN subscription because we don't use a lot of the other components that are coming with it, and it's very expensive. But that would be one thing to do. Another point that I would make is for $20 a month or whatever, you can have your own tenant, right? Like there's nothing that stops you from creating your own Office 365 tenant. Obviously, that costs. It's not cheap.
Now, the developer environment, by the way, would be one of the best practice mechanisms that you might use if you were
doing ALM and stuff
with a team of citizen developers who's doing ALM, all working on the same app, maybe at the same time, and you wanted the ability to actually, check in your change and do a pull request and all of that kind of stuff and merge things into a single app. And so developer environments are intended for that purpose.
Yep. So developer environments, developer license, if you will, is what I would look into. I would definitely, that would be something you could ask about internally. And I think it would make a lot of sense, and it may give you some options to learn some more things without having to mess around with as many people, because in that environment, you would be a sysadmin. You can do whatever you want in it. Mm-hmm. Cool. I think we're about at time. Yep, I agree, Tanya.
It's who you know.
All right. Thanks again for everyone joining. We will see you the next first Wednesday of May.